right. Hi, guys. All right, ready to talk about CMA review or paperwork questions?
I wish you would have done my homework because I would love to do a CMA with you.
I'm gonna do it if you want to stay. You're welcome to.
I do want to say I have to go talk to Sarah, but I'll stay for a little bit. You look warm.
Oh, it's just I get chilled, you know, so I just keep this at the office. So
Sorry.
all right, what'd you guys find out for value? Give me your numbers.
Okay, I'm coming. Never mind, I got you.
Should I say, let's see. So this is Sue. I would say around 295 to 305.
Cool. Shelly, did you do it or Mia, Javon, did you come up with a value?
Yeah, I say low 300s, kind of what Sue said, but yeah.
Okay.
Nice,
Anybody
Javon.
else? Go ahead, say it again. No? Did anyone else get a value?
I got a value, but mine is completely different.
For the
Mine's
Cottage Grove property?
Yes, I got 355.
Awesome, okay.
Interesting.
Yes. And so that makes me go, what did I do wrong when I was, and I went and did a CMA a little bit differently than how I normally do CMA. I did the CMA through North Star with them adding the properties.
Oh,
So, and I'm not used to doing it that way. So that may be where I got a different, because I mean, I was like, wow, what a difference in prices, but the houses that have sold in the last 180 days are all over 300,000 also.
yeah. Okay, if I'm not necessarily saying anyone is wrong or right, I haven't done it, so I'm just gonna walk through. So for those of you that saw me last week, Shelley, I know you weren't on last week. Sue, were you on last week?
No, I wasn't, unfortunately.
For some reason, my Wi-Fi is not connecting, so I'm just gonna shut down and restart. Because this is being yucky. So what I typically do is I pass it out. I want everyone to run the numbers yourselves because I think it's important that you practice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go step by step with how I would approach it. And I have a mild advantage because I am the one that actually sold these buyers the house. And so I have a visual memory of it, but for all intents and purposes, I have no idea if they've done any work to the house since they moved into almost 3 years ago. So I'm just going to walk through how I go about it. And while my computer's loading up, does anyone have any paperwork questions? Paperwork they've come across that they're struggling with or frustrated with that you wanted to ask for clarity around? Sue, I appreciated your clarity questions on what you'd ask for from a seller.
Totally, yeah.
So do you want to share that with the group, the things that, you know, what you said, what and why you asked it, just making sure?
So I would just want to ask the seller, I saw that it was last sold in 2020. So I would just want to see if they made any improvements, built any additions, like did any remodeling, if anything, like, you know, any defects have happened, like any material facts that we need to know about, like anything that would take value away from the home that I should know about. And that's it.
So I think it's an awesome question because the idea is if these people, stop video. If these clients, potential clients called you and said, hi, I want you to come look at my property. And you would want to ask those questions right there. So that you can identify if you need to take any of that into consideration. So I think it's awesome you brought it up, Sue. And I will tell you guys that, excuse me, I will tell you guys that oftentimes when that information is shared with me, I don't necessarily always, let's say, take it into consideration or rely on the information heavily, just for the simple fact that until I see it, I don't really know. Because they might say, well, I updated the whole kitchen and then we renovated a bathroom and then we put on a porch. And it's like, as much as you want to, give that value, it may not actually be value. It may not be the value you think it could be. So whenever we're doing a market analysis, the way that my methodology approaches CMAs is I'm looking at it from, I just want a baseline value point. So the good thing is we're all talking in the 3 to 350 range. Would you agree in the value you guys all pulled? And then what happens is, I'll talk about it at the end, but when I finally create the value, I don't create the value of the home or the suggested list price until I did my research and I saw the home. Okay, so when, I would typically come up with probably a range before I went to look at the house. So I'm gonna start right off the bat with so the first thing I do you guys, I'll just start and interrupt me as I go. So the first thing I do is the people call me and I'm like, oh, I'm going to look up this house. So I type in 7129 Joliet. If there's not, then I look down here, sorry, this is in my way. And I hit results. So I'm looking for, and the higher the MLS number, the more recent the transaction or the more recent the property was put into the MLS. So the bigger the number, the 2 in front means it's older, like from eons ago, and the 6 or 5 in front means it's newer. So that's just a little trick to find when you're looking at MLS numbers. They just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. All right, so then I click on this and I look at, oh, wow, they paid $289,900 for it. And they closed in September of 2020. And then because the MLS is super awesome, you can open up and see the pictures from the previous MLS. And that's what I look at first. All right, either new carpet or freshly vacuumed, pretty basic and neutral. Decent kitchen, looks like some new floors. Then I'd probably look at the remarks, right? So I remember all this about the house. It's just, I would call this like a very basic, neutral, average, bi-level split. Then I would take note at this deck because I'd be like, oh, wow, they got a blue deck. That's interesting. I wonder if they painted it because I'm hoping they did. Is it that big of a deal? No, but it does stand out, because if you can imagine, if you're looking at these pictures and a buyer's looking at these pictures, if you go from all these pictures that look the same as each other to this picture on the back, that blue deck really stands out. Just, food for thought for right now. And then it says it has 5 bedrooms, 2 bath, 2-car garage. And then typically what I do is I print out this page. So I have this data sitting next to me. And then the next thing I do is I jump into tax and I look at Erica and Deb is who owns it, the real AVM, this value right here. So it looks like the value range is estimated between 344 and 402. So if you knew nothing else, at all, you would know that the algorithm that's being used to evaluate this property thinks it's worth between 344 and 402. That's a basis point just for, you know, for consideration. And then we're gonna dive in down here. They still only have 2021. Oh, this is from when it was listed, the tax posting. I would have thought it would have been updated. That's weird. So then I'm gonna go into realist tax. And I'm just showing you some shortcuts along the way of just kind of how I go through it. So now I'm in realist. So this is actually a tab in the MLS, and you can pull this up and see this property on realist and get more information. And here's a little tip. See how this number right here is blue and this one's black? What do you think happens? Why do you think the second set of numbers is blue?
It's a link to take you to the county tax website, I'm guessing.
Yep,
And I
that's
think
exactly
I've
it.
heard that from you before another time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So just reiterating that a shortcut to the county tax info about this specific property is linked right here. This looks like 2022 tax amounts. So it looks like it's estimated value that it's assessed at, it's 353.6. And the taxes for 2022 that were paid, 39.90. Where do you put 39.90 if you get the listing?
On the MLS.
In the MLS or the MLS input form, right? So, and then here, there are a bunch of characteristics about the house, like the acre size. Right? So just pointing out where you find the data for the MLS. Okay. So I'm going to go back into the property 7129 Joliet. It is a 5-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do just to make my life easier is highlight the MLS number and hit Control-C or hit copy. And then when I go into my search to start looking for comps, I'm going to use that MLS number as a location point. Any questions so far? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start a new search. I'm going to go right here and drop in that MLS number, and I'm going to do a 1-mile radius. If you guys spend enough time with me and do this enough times, you're going to do it exactly like me because I just do it the same way every time. Come over here and I do coming soon, active. You can do temporary not available for showings, but I don't usually, and then pending close, and then comp sold. My system automatically puts in 0 minus 180, which means for the last 180 days. I always start with that because that's really the most relevant info. If you really wanted to get granular, you could go down to the last 90 days, but you always have to look at where are we in the market. Today is February 15th. The last 30 days brings us back to January 15th. The last 60 days brings us back to December 15th. The last 90 days brings us to November 15th. So if I were to do a search of just the last 90 days, I would basically be searching for homes that sold in like the worst market time frame, right? Are we in the worst market time frame right now?
No.
No, we're not. And the market's changing. And so we can't just look at data from that granular from 90 days. So I pulled 180. So that goes back 6 months. And that's a starting point. And we've got a mile radius of that MLS number. It doesn't even matter if you know that area or not. This is just a starting point. I hit single family and I also hit bi-level split. And after I did that, now again, I don't use any other style. If you want to do a neighborhood market analysis with all the styles being inclusive, you can do that, but that should be a separate analysis with a caveat or the explanation to the client that this is a neighborhood analysis that gives you a general range of price per square foot that things are selling at. But your home is a bi-level split, and I can only evaluate your home to other bi-level split homes in the general area. And appraisers start with a mile radius. They are more likely to go 2 miles away to find another split than they are to go with the next door neighbor that sold 30 days ago. That's a 2-story. Make sense? Okay, and then before I move forward, I look at this number right here. Do you guys, if you're doing this yourself, are you seeing the same number?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 6 matches. That feels light to me, like low, but we'll start there and see what happens. So we've got 1 pending and 5 closed, and they're basically between 352 and 440. All right, so we looked at the pictures of Joliet before we jumped on and started a new search. So the first thing I'm going to do is not really make any judgments. I'm just going to look. 2 of these have 5-bedroom, 3 of them have 4 bedrooms, 1 of them is 3-bedroom. If you were on with me last week, I got a great question about being concerned about bedrooms. I'm not concerned about bedrooms right now. I'm concerned about some baseline information to find homes that are similar, because the one on Jenner Lane that sold for $395 could have an unfinished basement with the potential of 1 or 2 more bedrooms being finished in the basement. All right, so let's go into, you know what else I'm noticing here is, what do all the street names start with?
J.
A J. So oftentimes that means that they're near each other or in a similar subdivision or neighborhood or development. Okay, so usually it's a good indication that we could be close. So this one was listed at 424.9, originally was listed at 449, it pended. And the first thing I do is jump into the photos. 2-car garage, bi-level split. So it's got the bigger staircase right there than the one that we're comparing it against. Oak woodwork, oak trim, that was like the one we're comparing against, so that's similar. There's vaults. I don't remember if the one that I had was vaulted or not. Kitchen looks somewhat similar, not too far off. Dining room, kitchen configuration is about the same. Bedroom, bathroom doesn't look all that updated, looks mostly original. This looks creamier versus white and bright. The other one looked whiter and brighter. Basement with who knows what's on the floor. It's a wood-ish product, wood-looking product, but I'd be like, I don't know what that is. Laundry room downstairs, it is a walkout. The one we're comparing it to does not have a walkout, but that's why you want that form next to you. So you're comparing like for like and figuring out how close it is as a comparable. And then that's, that bathroom right there is so original. It's not even funny. That gold enclosure, that medicine cabinet, the look of the vanity, the tile on the ground. Well, they don't have a blue deck, so they have that going for them. All right, so what do you guys think? Do you feel like it's kind of a comparable?
Yes.
I do. I think it's a comparable, so I'm going to select it. Then I'm going to go to the next one. And this one was listed at 360, sold at 352, and closed in the end of September. And so it looks like it had been renovated. It's got some vinyl floors, white kitchen. This looks pretty nice. So they've got the suspended ceiling. So when you're comparing apples to apples, if you have a sheetrock ceiling, it's considered more valuable than these panels that are suspended from the floor joists. So the ceiling is not as desirable. Doesn't mean it's not a comp, not yet, but it does mean that the quality of finishes are lower. For some reason in Minnesota, we don't have much interest in those types of ceilings. And the exterior curb appeal isn't necessarily amazing, but do you feel it's a comp?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you go over again the criteria that you chose?
I chose 1 mile radius
Right,
from the subject property,
right. And then,
single
ahead.
family homes that are bi-level split that sold in the last 180 days.
and that was it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Alexis, I have a quick question on the 1 mile radius. I was always told that appraisers go a half mile out. Do you always do a mile?
I do, because a half mile, I know the areas pretty well. And I know that, I guess, Shelley, what I consider is, I would never, rare is the opportunity to show a buyer that only wants to live in a half mile radius.
But I just have always heard that you go a half mile out, so it's good to hear that you can go a little bit further and be able to capture more properties. I like it.
I usually do a mile, and I like using a mile radius versus using like the city of Cottage Grove or like the city of Apple Valley, because I know that, so this is what I start with. If we keep going with this every Wednesday and we keep working on this, I would love to start throwing you guys some more challenging ones, because last week's was, I would say, not even medium challenge. This one is even lower challenge. Like, this is a really easy comparable to do, because there's a lot of housing supply near this, and they're all of the same era and vintage and condition, and a decent number of sales. When you get into unique properties, that's when you start getting creative with the distance and the location and the style and the, and if this was on the border of Hastings, for example, I might have to, it depends, because you might pull, so even though I use a mile radius, like if they all come up, if 3/4 of the comps that come back are all in Hastings and not actually in Cottage Grove, then I would go in and draw and make sure that I'm staying in Cottage Grove, because in our markets in this price point, I know that most buyers are school district sensitive. And so I wouldn't necessarily use a Hastings home, even though it might only be 1/4 mile away. I would use Cottage Grove only, and I would be specific to the school district. So 1 mile is what I start with. And I've never, if I don't get enough helpful data with that, then I move on from there. But the only time I would start smaller than like a half acre or a half mile or smaller is when it's a townhome development and they're all attached and it's just a small neighborhood and you don't. But single family homes, and the reason I say that about like a buyers look in Cottage Grove and in Hastings sometimes, right? So keeping it too close together, I feel like is too little information, and you could be totally off on pricing and not realize it.
Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, I would totally use Jasmine. And Sue, did I answer your question about criteria?
Yes, I used the wrong criteria, which is why I think I came up with a smaller number. I put in a price range, which I should not have done because that limits me to, yeah. So that was the first mistake. And then my like distance radius is too large. So anyways, I'm learning.
Good. Yeah. And that's why we're doing this. We're running through the exercise. Last week, we talked about, someone asked, are you concerned about the number of bedrooms? No, I'm not. The other thing I'm not concerned with is finished square footage.
That's another thing that I put in was I put in 5 bedrooms and 2 baths. So that limited me a lot.
And if something I know about our housing supply is that 5-bedroom split level homes could look exactly like 3-bedroom split level homes with unfinished space in the basement. So I would never want to eliminate something that's a true comp, which is why I'm being so generic about my poll. you know, like what's around there? And lo and behold, everything that's coming up is a really decent comp. So we'll go to the next one. All right, so we've got, it was listed at 380, came down to 359 and sold at 359.9, closed in August of last year. And then I'll look at the pictures. And this is a 3-car garage. So it's the first thing I note that is improvement over the house, the subject property. This has granite countertops and looks like upgraded appliances. They're not necessarily stainless. It's got an undermount sink, new floors. Looks like hardwood of some sort or wood-ish of some sort. We've got creamy neutrals here, different than the white. You know, you've got different buyers will respond differently to different colors inside houses. And so that can be a factor. Fireplace downstairs. I don't know if you remember or not, but ours had a fireplace downstairs. One thing to note, these basement photos, that is a 4-seater chair or table and chairs in the basement, which leads me to believe that that basement is pretty narrow. So it definitely doesn't have high functionality. These are just things I'm noticing in my head. I'm mentioning them to you guys. And also when you list homes, for crying out loud, don't make this mistake, because seriously, the only thing you see in this picture is that silly table in the middle of all 3 of these pictures. Right? Like these photos would have been better off without that table in there entirely, because the table throws off what the space could actually be used for. And do you guys notice how much it affects these photos and the look of the usability of the space?
Yeah,
see
is it
that?
supposed to be a dining room or?
Well, this is the lower level. So I'm
Yeah,
thinking
it's like-
they've staged it like maybe a card table.
Yeah,
But to me, it's a horrible mistake. Because if you were a buyer thinking about moving to Cottage Grove and you were in this price range, does this room look desirable to you?
No, it looks too small.
Looks too small, and it looks like it, and seriously, the people that aren't creative are gonna think that it's another eating space in the lower level. Here's the other thing I'm gonna point out. Why in the world hasn't anyone written descriptions under the photos? I mean, I'm sorry, but it's one of the easiest ways to market a home, and not everyone does it.
it's
You-
so easy. And if you're lucky enough to have a listing, like you gotta own it, you know, put
the effort in. And these are things that you guys can incorporate into your listing presentations, talking about, I mean, I'm not even trying. Every listing I pulled up so far, none of them have descriptions in the listing or under the photos. When you go to a listing appointment and say you're gonna do this, you can literally show examples of how so many agents don't. I know it's off topic, but still. Beautiful lush yard. The one I had was not a beautiful lush yard. But still, do you think it's a comp?
Yeah,
Yep, even with a 3-car garage, it's a comp. So here's one at list price $375, sold for $395, closed in October. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage. And then here's the photos. Gas fireplace on the upper level, beautiful white kitchen, stainless appliances. Okay. Number 1, there's no descriptions under the photos. And number 2, there's so many things to say about this house. Those floors are gorgeous. The lights look like they're sparkling. There's like the staging isn't anything spectacular. So you don't always need like the most trendy current staging, but just having neutral things and neutral walls. Look at how different this property shows up and how many more buyers and how many more showings they probably had. Again, I'm going off topic, but still. Granite countertops, white cabinets, stainless appliances. See, even this, This is more than just a CMA class. Never use patterned comforters. Because what is this photo doing? It's just selling the bed. It doesn't even show the space. You don't want the bed or the comforter to stand out. You want the room to stand out. That's why a lot of listing agents, when you have a listing, they'll go buy a quilt that's just a neutral color and lay it over there. You know, little staging efforts. Updated bathroom, doesn't even necessarily need to be the highest end finishes, but it is updated. The stairs to the entryway look nice. You know, this is a futon in the lower level with a TV sitting on top of like a high boy store, like a bedroom furniture storage. And it actually makes sense because it's a couch and a TV more than that table did in that other one. Besides the point, all the woodwork is white. Bathrooms look updated. The exterior leaves a little to be desired. Concrete driveway, nice deck, landscaping, paver patio. So again, all we're doing is going through pictures to be like, do we think this is the comp?
Yeah.
I think it's a comp, but it was high, so it might end up getting bumped. I don't know. We'll see, right? So I'm gonna incorporate it because it only has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. So then I'm gonna go down here and I'm gonna look at, there's 2 bedrooms on the main, 1 on the lower. Living room, dining room is on the main level, kitchen's on the main level, family room lower. So this one, right off the bat, I know that the size of this house is smaller than the size of the house that we're comparing it against. But the reason I would keep this in as a comp is because when I meet with the sellers and I show them what my summary value is, I want to show this house to show them what the house needs to look. You could have a smaller house that looks like this and sell for more. That's how much finishes can affect the value of a home. So I keep it in there. It might be an outlier, and I am pretty sure that it would be helpful to me that if their house doesn't look like this, they know they can't list it that high. Does that make sense, guys?
Totally.
Awesome. 5 bedroom, 2 bath, 2 car garage, built in 94. So this is 100 square feet bigger on the foundation size than the last one. And it sold on December 20th. I'm going to pull up pictures. Well, they have a red deck, so that is comparable. Okay, so this is an example of, I've actually never seen the sunshine show up like this in a photo. And so whatever's being used here, this is why photography matters, because look at how colorful these pictures are. And just somewhat distorted they look. So all these little things matter when you're going to list a home and you put it on the MLS, because this is what buyers are seeing. And they're like, why is this agent, you know, like have these weird sun photos in the picture, and then other agents have these really high quality professional photos. All right, so we've got vaulted living room upstairs, big open concept. So this is somewhat of a newer floor plan because it's got a big open concept, where ours has the walls delineating everything. The kitchen actually looks bigger than the one in our scenario. The bathroom looks nicely updated. That's a whole new vanity unit. Look at that bedspread, it's blue. It stands out, but your attention isn't called to it because there's no pattern on that bed. It's just one solid color. All right, so we've got upper bedrooms, lower corner fireplace in the family room, walkout lower level. Ours doesn't have a walkout. Lower level bathroom looks like it's just fine, nothing special about it. All right. Yeah. So for the time being, I'm going to use it as a comp because I just don't know where we're going to end up. And I only have 6 to choose from right now, and I'd rather use something closer than further away. So now this one is the furthest away from our numbers that we've been looking at and considering. It was on the market 8 days and it closed in September of last year. Was at 424.9, sold for 440. Look at how big the foundation size is compared to that one that was at 390. 960. So this is over 300 square feet bigger than on the foundation size than the one that sold for 390 that was all updated. So big entryway. Look at how big that entryway is that it has that huge storage bench right there. Vaulted upper level. Again, why no one uses any remarks boggles my mind, makes my job easier, because if there's ever anyone that I'm competing against, it's crazy that more people don't do this. So right off the bat, I'm already feeling like this house does not look or feel like the subject property we're comparing it to. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
It just feels different. It looks different. Even though it has similar finishes, you can tell that it's newer and a different design and layout. Like and again, we're looking at this from a listing agent value standpoint, but you also want to look at it from a buyer value standpoint, where they're like, any buyer would love this house way more than any of the other ones we just looked at, because there's more space, it's more open, it's more vaulted, it's somewhat more updated. So this is one where, had it been a more similar home, it has some unfinished space in the basement. It could have still been a comp, but it's definitely not, even more so now, because it's got so much unfinished space in the basement that it's definitely not a comp, so I'm not going to use it. But we're just going to pause here at these beautiful pictures. And I just want to point out how jarring they are to see. And so it's a textured bedspread with pink and blue walls and oak door. When you meet with sellers that have rooms like this and they're like, but my daughter loves her room color, you have to have difficult conversations with them and have picture examples of how it doesn't come through and show on the MLS. If I were this agent, I never would have published these photos, because this can actually be a detraction. Because in everything we saw in this house, what do you think is the easiest thing to remember from these pictures? The ugly bedroom. Now, I'm not saying it's ugly, but it doesn't look like it matches the rest of the house. And a buyer is instantly going to think that's work unless they have a child that thinks that that is the perfect color scheme. And the chances of that are slim to none. And no sellers, nobody wants to come in and make it their own. No, buyers don't like to have to come in and paint their new house. They want to come in and move right in. That's where we're at least at this price point. Okay, so I don't use this one as a comp. I've got 5 comps. I'm going to go back to agent single line display. And then here's my comps that I have selected. I'm going to go to refine. What does narrow mean? What does discard mean?
Discard the ones you have checked,
And so what does narrow mean?
narrow down to the ones you have checked.
Right. So we're going to narrow. So we're going to get rid of the one I didn't select. We're going to come back to actions. We're going to hit CMA. And then this is where you can do, you put the contact name in, and then we're going to do, you name it, you give it a description. Then I hit my pages. And the pages I use are summary list. And then I use comparables. And then I use map. And that's all I use. Then we go to subject, and I still have that MLS number saved. And I'm going to do autofill. So this is the subject property. And then if I want to see the comparables, there they are there. You can actually see it imports the the subject property compared to everything else. So quick at a glance is, we have 5 bedrooms and 2 baths. The rest of our comps all have 2 baths also. In my honest opinion, bathrooms are a bigger value adjuster than bedrooms are. Because I could show someone a 5-bedroom home that's only looking for 3 bedrooms. And 5 bedrooms doesn't necessarily increase the value of a home, or not that much anyway. We've got total finished square footage of just under 2,000 in a 1992 built home. So all kind of in the same general era. And 1900, we've got 17, 18, 18, 21. So this one right here on Jocelyn at 2,500 square feet is much bigger than ours. But overall, I feel comfortable with these comps, that they seem to be a pretty good indicator. I haven't seen the house yet, right? So I'm just looking at this going, yeah, that's not bad. So look at that. I pulled up the map and then it shows me my property is the one in blue. And then the 4 reds are sold and the 1 orange is pending or coming soon or something. I don't know. It's not sold. And that's all relatively close together for Cottage Grove. And then I don't use adjustments, so I skip that. If you want to practice with that, you're more than welcome. It auto saves for you. And then I go right here and I hit view CMA and it'll pop it up. Pink and blue room. Yep, you're right, Javon. All right, so here's my market analysis summary page. So pending listing on Jocelyn is at $424.9 and they're coming in at about $167 a square foot. My sold averages, our average price is $386, $360, and their average price per square foot is $194. And it says the median price of comparable listings is $395 and the average of comparable listings is $386. And I see my low point is $352 and my high point is $424. So I know after looking at the comps in a mile radius of bi-level splits that have sold, that my range is $350 to $425. My guess is if they did nothing to the house, the subject property on Joliet matches mostly with Jasmine and Jody. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yes.
And so if it matches with Jasmine and Jody, that's probably putting my value in the 350 to 360 range. But if I went there and they did a kitchen refresh and a bathroom refresh, and they had some really awesome staging and furniture, couldn't it feasibly be listed at $399.9 looking at these numbers? It could.
Yes.
It could. What else is a factor in this analysis that could help you increase the list price? What other data point are we realizing from this analysis that could push the list price higher? What's missing? Active homes for sale.
Oh.
There's no competition. When there's no competition, your pricing doesn't matter as much. As long as I have comps to justify that homes with a similar size and offering were sold up to $424.9, I would totally feel, my suggestion to them is I wouldn't list higher than $375 if nothing about the house changed. My suggestion would be to list at $359.9. I wouldn't go, I would say we could go to $375 and just see what happens in the market. And if they were the type of sellers that's like, I don't want a dime less than $400, I'd be like, all right, let's list at $399. Because there's no competition. And it's under 400,000. So I think if I were to say what I think the value is without seeing the house, I would say $359.9. And I would list it, I would be comfortable listing it at $359.9 all the way up to $399.9. depending on where the sellers were at. Sometimes sellers are realistic and go like, well, that's what the market says it's worth. And if I listed it at 359.9, I bet it would sell in the 390s because there's no competition and probably lots of buyers. And the coolest thing about this document right here is you could say it says whatever you want. Does that make sense? Because I actually didn't read you guys any of this. This is just the summary where it kind of puts it in at a glance, and I'm looking at it going, well, so then what I do is I print this out with the subject property compared to the other properties. And I print out the photos, the interior photos of each of the comparable homes, especially the one on Jocelyn that's at 424.9. And I bring them the pictures, or I save them on my computer and I show the sellers. And when they're like, why can't we list at 424.9? I'll gladly open those photos and show the sellers, does your home look like this one that sold at 424.9? And they can answer that question themselves. And they're gonna say, no, it doesn't. And then I'm gonna open the one on Jody that's 359.9 and say, does your home look like this? And they're gonna go, yep. And I'm gonna go, so what do you think we should list at? Because it's based on what the buyers were willing to pay for what they saw. So that's pretty much the way that I approach it and how I pull in the data and kind of come with no preconceived idea. And the one other thing that I want to mention that I went over was that realist AVM value. And that gave me a range, and I knew kind of where it should be in general. And if I was way off of that, then I knew I was probably wrong.
I have a
But my
question.
analysis is much better than that AVM.
Quick question.
Yeah,
So if there was a school nearby, would that affect the price of like the CMA?
no, not the way you phrased the question. The answer would be no. If we were in Cottage Grove and we are looking at this map and we were, and see this, all this blank space over here? This is like the edge of Cottage Grove. And the schools won't affect the value, but not being in the desired school district could affect the value. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Other questions? Thoughts, comments?
This was definitely helpful. Learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Glad we could pop on and run through it. Happy to continue it if you guys are on board. I mean, basically my plan is I'll just keep dishing out property addresses and we'll just keep flushing it out and I'll keep walking through it. The whole goal would be pretty soon one of you can lead it and how you actually, the methodology you went through. Because the whole idea is the more you practice this, the better you get at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're interested in getting next week's address and doing the analysis ahead of time, practicing on your own, and then coming back next Wednesday and running through it with me, just text me and I'll send you the address, the next address.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Alexis.
You're welcome. Have a good day, guys.
Good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
I was not there last week, and I have never done CMA.
You've never done one?
I checked a little bit, but was not sure.
Oh, okay, okay.
I just heard now you're saying that 5-bedroom by itself is not something. I was trying to list my brother's house, and have the 5 bedroom bathroom.
Yeah,
That was like last year.
Yep,